Day 2 of talks at Northeast PHP. I'm really, really excited to introduce to you right now a person who I admire and who I find as amazingly brilliant. Jen Kramer is, she's just amazingly intelligent. She's fantastic at what she does.
Wow.
And even more than that, like people can be really good at something, but she can explain it so well so that no matter where you're starting, by the end, you come away and you understand exactly what she's been talking about. Jen Kramer, she did videos at lynda.com. If you never get to hear her speak again, you can always just go download one of the videos and watch her teach you things at your leisure. It's amazing. And she's just wonderful. You guys are in for a treat and you're going to have a good time. So,
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Man, I feel like a rock star. Well, welcome everybody. How's everybody doing? How's the conference going? Good? Good? Okay. So at this point, we're at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon and you all are ready to go to sleep, right? Yes. Okay. I will do my best to keep you all awake. So we're going to talk about Twitter Bootstrap and Zurb Foundation. Okay, so how many of you have heard of Bootstrap? Okay, how many of you have heard of Foundation? More than I thought. Excellent. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do today. We are going to do the following. First of all, I'm going to ground you a little bit in mobile techniques. I did a Bootstrap workshop on Friday from 9 to 12, and I was kind of surprised by some people needed a little bit backfilling on some of the stuff, so I'm going to start at a very basic level, tell you just a little bit about some mobile techniques. I'm going to tell you a little bit about responsive design as well, sort of ground you where we are. And then I'm going to go into what is Bootstrap and what is Foundation, and then finally we'll compare them. And of course, we'll declare a winner, because there can only be one, right? There can only be one. All right, so this is what we're going to be talking about. First of all, it is all about mobile, and I think this is the best picture ever that explains it all. This is St. Peter's Square in Rome when the popes were announced in 2005 and 2013. Do you see a difference between the pictures? Okay? Now, granted, they are all taking photos, but what are they going to do with those photos? They're immediately going to go post them somewhere. So as all of the responsive design, mobile first speakers have told you, mobile is here to stay. If you don't believe them yet, please just look at this picture. Internalize this. It is truly here to stay. Okay, the two big approaches to mobile that we've heard about. First of all, you can build a separate mobile compatible website or a mobile app or both. Okay, jQuery Mobile is one of the approaches to this. There was a great talk on jQuery Mobile yesterday. Or you can go with this concept of responsive design. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit more about responsive design in just a second. As always, which is better? The answer is? It depends. This is your $1 million consulting phrase. If you are ever in a gig and a client asks you a question and you don't know the answer, if you simply say, it depends, you are always right. Okay, so it depends as to which is the better approach here. There is an article here that you can go and read that will compare these methods, and you can decide which is right for your particular approach. We could probably do a whole talk about the differences between mobile applications and responsive design and so forth. All right, so a little bit about responsive design. This was described by Ethan Marcotte in his article here at A List Apart back in May of 2010. So the technique's only been out for 3 years. Nobody knows anything, because we're still working on what exactly this is. But responsive design is defined by 3 characteristics, and that's it. Those 3 characteristics are a flexible grid-based layout, images that resize, and media queries. That's all that responsive design is. Now, we have a tendency in the field to like to take terms and make them mean more than one thing. For example, if I say to you the word server, server might mean a piece of hardware, or it might mean a piece of software, right? And it depends on the context I use it in the sentence. Responsive design is another one of these terms. People tend to think of responsive design as my website responds to the piece of hardware where I'm viewing it, right? But technically speaking, responsive design refers to these 3 techniques, okay? And I've actually advocated the use of the word reactive technology to encompass all of the various techniques that are used. Responsive design, a separate mobile website or mobile app as a way of developing websites for the mobile environment. Okay, So what are these things? Here is a grid-based layout. This is actually Bootstrap version 2. A grid-based layout means that you have planned your website in 12, in this case, 12 columns. You can use more columns than that, but 12 is a nice number because it manages math pretty easily. And those would be the pink columns. And then you can group these columns together as units. So you can use 12 individual columns going across. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Okay? You can group them together. So the second row there shows you 3 groups of 4 columns. All right? Or you could just say, I want 3 on one side and 9 on the other. And this gives you the shape of your web page. The wonderful thing about using a grid system that's written out of the box is that somebody else has gone through the process of writing all the CSS to make this happen, and they debugged it. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Especially where positioning is concerned, all right? So that's what the grid-based layout is. You'll also need images that resize. If you were just up here for Jonathan's talk, he talked a lot about images that resize and very specific techniques for how these images can resize. I'm going to talk very broadly and generally here to summarize. Okay? What is images that resize? What this means is that images should change size based on your screen resolution. If you have a big screen, you got a honkin' big image. If you got a tiny little narrow screen, you get a little image. And ideally, you're not downloading the honkin' big image on the tiny little screen with all the associated costs with bandwidth and potentially a slow download. So there's a couple of approaches for that. You can load that big image and then let it scale, right? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. This is probably not a really good technique for all of the obvious reasons. You can do something server-side, so let the server decide how big that particular screen is and then serve up an image. You can write a PHP interface so I can upload one big image and it'll resize it into a bunch of different formats for me. It'll be a beautiful thing. That is a pretty good technique, okay? Whoops, whoa, what just happened? Oh, look at that. Yay, grid-based layout, images that resize. There we go, client side. You can load several images and then display the one that's right for this resolution. This is the infamous, quote, display none approach. So what I'll do is I'll have 3 image tags in a row, one that calls the big image, one that calls the medium image, one that calls the small image. I'll associate classes with those that will only show it at certain dimensions. Anyone see a problem in this? Who went to Jonathan's talk and knows the answer? Right, a performance thing, right? Now you have 3 images that download instead of 1, and only 1 is displaying. So this is really not a good technique either, okay? Or you can actually have some JavaScripts that will decide for you. So it will say, JavaScript will decide that your screen is so big and then load that particular image. And that is a reasonable approach as well. It's a client-side approach, okay? And that actually comes with Foundation. Whoa, out of the box with Foundation, you can manage your images using that technique, letting JavaScript decide. Hey, how cool is that? That is not in Bootstrap. All right, media queries. Okay, so media queries. The browser is reporting the screen resolution. The browser always knows how big it is. And then what happens is, based on that width, a certain style sheet or piece of style sheet is going to load based on that width, based on the parameters that you set, greater than, later than, max and min kind of widths. And according to that style sheet, then the look of the screen is going to change accordingly. Make sense? Okay, no JavaScript is involved. I want to clarify this because some people think JavaScript is part of media queries. JavaScript has nothing to do with media queries whatsoever. Okay? All right, so then the most popular question that I get, I have worked for Lynda.com now for 5 years making videos for them. I have videos out on Bootstrap, I have videos out on Foundation, and the first question that I always get is this: should I use a responsive design framework? Anybody know what my answer is? Yes. It depends. Yes, indeed, it depends. So there's a couple of approaches to front-end design. And I started to think about this yesterday at Eli White's talk. So I started to think about the ways that we approach front-end web design, and really it boils down to 1 or 2 approaches. Either we install WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, and then we go on out and we get that canned template that somebody made, right? We install it in our content management system, we change some colors, we drop in a logo, and we go, hey, I'm a designer. Yeah, right? just like the sushi that you find at the grocery store. Or you take this approach, right? You have the sushi chef who's been trained for years and years and years and makes absolute art out of food, right? So then you call in the graphic designer and you do 3 graphic designs and 2 rounds of changes and picking at it by the client and so on and so forth. And you build a completely custom website from scratch, right? Can anybody think of middle ground here? It's one or the other, I think, in our front-end world. Now, Eli White said something to me yesterday in his keynote that I thought was really interesting. He said, no one codes their own survey now that they're SurveyMonkey. Now, this was not like news to me that in fact no one codes a survey because they're SurveyMonkey. But I was thinking about this thing with responsive design frameworks and the concept of these back-end people and what they're doing. For years, I built Joomla websites. Don't hate me. For years, I built Joomla websites. And I would hire PHP developers, because I don't know any PHP. And I would hire PHP developer A, and then he'd do some work for me, and it was great, right? And PHP guy A would move on, and PHP B guy would come along. And he would take a look at A's code, and guess what he said to me? Anybody know? That guy's code sucked. What were you thinking, Jen, working with him all those years? I have to redo all of this code. I have to recode everything from scratch because he was an idiot, okay? So then what happened when B went away and I hired C? What was the conversation that I had? That code totally sucked, right? And it goes on and on and on and on and on. We do the same thing in the front-end world. Anybody notice that? Oh, your markup is terrible. It's not semantic. There's too many divs. You didn't do this, that, or the other thing. Your CSS is too bulky. We can't get around this in the front-end world. The back-end people have gotten smart, finally. They say, there's a bunch of APIs out there. If I take the API from SurveyMonkey and the API from Facebook and I wave my magic wand and put some stuff in, I come out with an application in 10 hours. Or I could spend 1,000 hours and write my own from scratch. And the code will be good because I wrote it, right? We don't do this in the front-end world. So this was my whoa moment for me. While the back-end world worked on these APIs, and they have this middle ground approach now, we on the front end don't. It's either off the shelf or it's wholly custom. There is no middle ground at all. Okay? So I would like you to think about these frameworks as middle ground. Some of the work has been done for you. That's a wonderful thing. It's debugged. Your layout is already debugged if you use one of the grid systems that come with Foundation or Bootstrap. It's done. You don't have to debug it again. It works on the browsers that are specified. You can still customize what you get. One of the common critiques I hear about Bootstrap is all Bootstrap sites look exactly the same. Why do all Bootstrap sites look exactly the same? Anybody know? Because they take it and they install it and they do nothing to it. They'd say, hey, I don't want a black nav bar, I want a green one. Hey, we're done. Of course they all look the same. It's the same reason that all WordPress sites look the same, right? Or all Drupal sites look the same, right? Or all Joomla sites look the same, okay? It doesn't have to look like a Bootstrap or a Foundation site unless you want it to. Really, honestly and truly, you can customize the heck out of both of these systems. Okay. So now that I've gotten that off my chest, this was quite a revolution for me. So I want you to think about this as a productivity tool. Okay? A productivity tool to make responsive websites quickly and accurately and easily, and you can then customize the heck out of them and make them your own. So we're going to be looking at 2 things today. We're going to be looking at Bootstrap. They're at getbootstrap.com. We're going to be looking at Foundation. Foundation's at foundation.zurb.com. And if you don't like these 2, here's a link for 15 more responsive design frameworks you can go and explore. Because if 2 are good, 15 must be better. All right. So before I get started on my comparison, let me give you a disclaimer. First of all, as I mentioned, I am a lynda.com author. I've worked with both of these frameworks. I've recorded videos on both of them. I am currently writing a book on Bootstrap 3. It will be by Pearson. It'll be one of those Sam's 24-hour Bootstrap books, probably sometime next year. I am not working on coding for either Bootstrap or Foundation. I don't write code for them. I don't contribute code. I'm not involved in the development process. I don't do any of that. All right? And I have no insight into either one of these projects. I don't really know the guys that are there. I just know what's publicly available. So I go out and I read a lot. And finally, I think both of these frameworks are totally awesome. And they are amazing in their own right. And they're appropriate for different situations and for different skill sets. Okay? So that's my big disclaimer. Having said all that, let's get ready to rumble. If you're tired of listening to me babble and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you'd rather be having a nap, I have put together an entire spreadsheet for you. It's at Google Docs. You can click this link. Absolutely everything has been compared. It's like, I don't know, 80 or 90 lines long. I have gone through both sets of documentation. I have exhaustively compared everything. It is all documented in the spreadsheet. Go and read. Okay? And it's just based on the documentation they have on their website. All right, so first of all, what is Bootstrap? It is the most popular responsive design framework out there for building websites and web applications. Hands down, number one, the most popular. And it is the most popular project on GitHub. Hands down. It's got like 56,000 stars. The number 2 project has got like, I don't know, 30,000 stars. It's runaway the most popular project up there. And it's used by NASA and MSNBC and a bunch of other kinds of places. All right? What goes into Bootstrap 3? Anybody here familiar with Bootstrap 2? A few of you? Okay. Bootstrap 2 had 1 grid system. Bootstrap 3 has 4 different sizes. It's got a small grid that will always stay horizontal, and then it's called the extra small grid. And then there's a small, medium, and large grid that have different breakpoints based on their media queries. It's got some base CSS. It styles everything in sight. Okay? Have you seen a Bootstrap site? Everything is styled. Absolutely everything is styled. Okay? Some a little bit more extensively than others, but everything is styled. You customize your CSS. You can either write your own CSS in an additional separate style sheet that layer on your styles, or you can customize through less CSS. All right? Anyone familiar with less CSS? More is less. Okay? Less CSS is a CSS preprocessor that's written in JavaScript, and the Bootstrap guys will tell you they picked this because they know JavaScript. So that is what they decided to go ahead and go with. They do have a bunch of jQuery-driven components that are there. So you'll run jQuery in addition to a separate Bootstrap JavaScript file, and they include a whole bunch of stuff. Tons of stuff. And it's all debugged for you. It's a beautiful thing. You just like change your HTML a little bit, and a drop-down menu appears. You don't have to code it from scratch. Okay? There is an optional icon font that's available for incorporating vector images, which is really nice. So you can go ahead and have icons now. And for those of you who are lawyers, it is distributed under Apache 2, and it's copyright 2013 Twitter. Whatever that means to you. Okay? Great. Foundation. Their description is it's an easy-to-use, powerful, and flexible framework for building prototypes and production code on any kind of device. I think they just said the same thing that Bootstrap did. It is the 13th most popular project on GitHub. I believe it only has, 20,000 stars or something. 13th most popular. You may not have heard of it, but it's out there, and it's used by National Geographic Education and Pixar Projection, among many others. Zurb is a company that's based out of Campbell, California. They do professional website design and development. They originally developed Foundation for use in-house. They've open sourced it. And interesting to note, Mark Otto, who is one of the 2 guys behind Bootstrap, used to work at Zurb. He worked at Zurb until 2007, and then he went off to Twitter. Okay, so Foundation 4, which is the current version, what is in that? A fully functional grid system, 3 different sizes, plus a block grid. The block grid is designed for doing things like an unordered list, and you want a bunch of thumbnails. It'll lay out those thumbnails in however many across you want to do that. And the other grid system is small, medium, and large. They have base CSS that does a bunch of stuff, but you'll discover that the bunch of stuff that they style is styled way less than what Bootstrap styles, to the level that Bootstrap styles. So yes, they'll take an unordered list and make it go horizontally across the page. And that's about it for Foundation. Whereas Bootstrap will say, oh, we can have tabs, and we can have pills, and we can do all these other things. They customize via Sass and Compass, which of course is Ruby-based instead of JavaScript-based. okay? And there really is truly an expectation on Foundation's part that you are going to know SAS and that this is how you're going to customize your CSS. This is how it's going to be done. They have a bunch of jQuery components. I'll go through some of those in a little while. And they have, interestingly, 3 sets of icon fonts for incorporating vector images, but they have not been tested with Foundation 4. Strange but true. But they have icon fonts. Use them at your own risk. And they are distributed under the MIT license. Okay? So that should give you a little overview about both of these projects, where they stand in the universe. Anybody got any questions so far? Nope? Fabulous. Okay? Good. All right, so the next few slides are sort of comparing these, there's like 6 of them, comparing some of the things that should probably be important to you as front-end developers. Number 1 being browser support, right? Okay, so Bootstrap is supporting the latest versions of Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Opera. In some cases, it's Mac and Windows. Sometimes that's plus or minus Mac and Android, iOS and Android. And then they are supporting, in this latest version of Bootstrap, they're supporting IE 9 and 10 only. There is a, if you work with respond.js and include that in your code, you can go back to IE 8. So IE 7 is not supported in Bootstrap, okay? If you need to work with IE 7, then you can go use what is current up until probably tomorrow when they finally release Bootstrap 3. We're still technically at RC2, and that is version 2.3.2. Less sophisticated grid system, but it supports IE 7, okay? Foundation, pretty much the same thing, although there are some minor differences. Bootstrap explicitly says they support Opera. Foundation explicitly says they support Windows Phone and Surface. Okay? Once again, Foundation is supporting IE 9 and 10 only. They do have the ability to go back to IE 8. There is a gist that you can get from the Foundation site. If you include that gist inside of your code, then you can actually support IE 8 as well. All right? And I know how much everyone loves IE. And we're at a Microsoft facility. So I'm going to show you my favorite slide of all time, which is a graph of the declining Internet Explorer share in the United States graphed against the US murder rate. I'm just saying, you know, they kind of graph together. You can draw your own conclusions. I did not say all designers are murderers. Yes, I do know that you have committed many murders in your head, however. I know you've done it. Okay, accessibility. This is a very interesting area that people frequently overlook when it comes to front-end web development, but accessibility may be very important based on what kind of client you have, what you're doing, Section 508 requirements, and so forth. Bootstrap has put some effort into accessibility improvements in version 3. And in fact, they've started to include a lot of ARIA codes. Those codes were included in version 2. They've expanded on those. They now also offer some screen reader only styles. What a screen reader only style will do is basically hide it from every browser there ever was, but if you are working with a screen reader, then certain things will become apparent to that. And I would like to say that Joomla is the one who's been pushing for this. Joomla, who got slighted in Eli White's talk, still the #2 content management system out there. Joomla has incorporated Bootstrap 2 in Joomla version 3. They ship together as part of core. Joomla has always had a big commitment to accessibility, and so what they told Bootstrap was, you guys got to get up on your accessibility game in order for us to continue to use your product. So Joomla has really done a lot to push for Bootstrap's accessibility kind of thing. As for Foundation, I looked for any information in the docs for accessibility, and I didn't find anything. So I tweeted the guys at @FoundationZerb yesterday and said, you know, how about accessibility? And I got a response. This is from Jonathan Smiley, who is one of Zerb's partners or founders. And he says, we don't have anything specific in the docs, though most of our components are fairly accessible. We'd like to do more here. All right? So if accessibility is important to you, I think you're probably better off using Bootstrap from what you can derive here. But obviously, they say they'd like to do more, so watch for later versions of Foundation. They are working on a version 5 that's supposed to be out in the 3rd quarter. The grid systems. All right, like I said before, Bootstrap has this 4-grid system now. There's an extra small grid, which is everything's going to stay horizontal. No matter how big or how small the screen is, you're always going to have that number of columns. Okay? And then there's small, medium, and large grids that are going to stack at various breakpoints. Okay, so you go from going across the screen horizontally to things stacking vertically, is what happens. Foundation has just 3 grids. So the small, again, is always staying horizontal, and the medium and large grids are going to hit a breakpoint, and then they're going to stack in exactly the same way. One thing that is different about Foundation is that you can center columns on the page, okay, which is kind of nice. So rather than making it 12 columns across and then centering the text or whatever's inside of it, you can actually center the columns themselves with Foundation. A little bit about styling. Like I said, Bootstrap has a ton of stuff that's styled. Everything is styled. If you build out a Bootstrap site completely out of the box, it actually looks fairly decent right out of the box without ever dropping in a style of your own. However, there is no right to left support. So if you are in a situation where you need to support one of the languages that go right to left, Bootstrap doesn't have a way of supporting that at all. Okay? Oh, geez, says Bill from the United Nations. Yeah, it can be a problem. If you have to support Farsi or something, it's an issue. There are some styles that are specific to Bootstrap. Jumbotron is one of those great big huge banners that go at the top of the page that seem to be required on everybody's site these days, you know, with the big honking text and the big picture. That's called the Jumbotron. It used to be called the Hero Unit. There's these things called medium objects and media lists. That's basically the picture with the little text next to it, kind of like a bunch of blog posts. And the well is an indentation. It looks like something is pushed down, like being pushed down a well. Okay, so those are some things that are styled in Bootstrap that are not in Foundation. Foundation, in general, there is less styling right out of the box. But that may not be a bad thing depending on your perspective. That may be a totally awesome thing because guess what? There's less to override. Okay? So it's very, very easy to layer your own styles. Like I was suggesting, if your navigation bar is going horizontal and it's just plain old blue links, okay, you can now layer whatever you want on top of that to customize that nav bar without overriding a bunch of stuff. It does offer right to left support, so that is a big differentiator. And specific to Foundation, they have a couple of things. One's called pricing tables, and one's called keystrokes. Pricing tables, if you just think about a little box that's got a bunch of product information and a button at the bottom, that's a pricing table. And they're built with using unordered lists, so don't let tables make you think that it's table-based layout. It's not. And keystrokes are little boxes with rounded corners around a set of characters. So it's like Control K. You can have a little box around the word Control, a little box around the word K. Nice for documentation purposes. A little bit about the CSS preprocessors. Bootstrap uses less CSS, as I said. And there's really next to no documentation on the Bootstrap documentation site. If you're looking for information about less CSS, you're going to be hard-pressed to find anything at all. They mention things occasionally on the site, but there's really not a lot of documentation. And there is actually less of an expectation that you will work with less. I think Bootstrap kind of expects you to write your own separate style sheet. You're going to layer on your own styles. And you're not really going to dig much into the less. It's there if you want it, but it's not kind of an expectation. And there is no official training available from Bootstrap. They're an open source project. They are not offering classes or anything like that. Foundation, on the other hand, as I mentioned, uses Sass and Compass. If you hate Compass, you can run just the Sass side of it. I'm not sure why you would do that, but you can. There is extensive Sass documentation on the Foundation site. As again, I think there's this expectation that you will absolutely modify the heck out of Foundation. So when you read their documentation, the top half of the page, or top third of the page in some cases, talks about the HTML and the CSS classes you need to use to make something work. And the bottom third, 2/3 of the page goes on and on and on about Sass and all of the variables and mix-ins and so forth, so that you can write your own styles, which is kind of cool. The expectation. Zurb also offers training. They are a company. Okay, even though Foundation itself is an open source project, They do offer training for both Foundation and for SAS, and the training is offered online. So you can sign up for one of their training courses and they'll walk you through how to style things with SAS or how to get up and running with Foundation. Or you can go watch my fine class at lynda.com, Up and Running with Foundation. You have a free 7-day pass. Okay. Unique JavaScripty widgets. Okay, there's a lot of stuff in common. Okay, they both do things like they both have tabs, they both have accordions, they both have pop-ups, they both have drop-downs. You know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's in common between these guys. So I just wanted to focus on what was different in regards to their JavaScript. One thing is a fixes the element in page while the page scrolls. So if you think about a long page of documentation, Bootstrap actually uses this on their site. They have the sub-navigation over on the left, and things are scrolling up and down the page, but the navigation's staying in place. That's a fix, okay? Scroll Spy updates the nav bar with the current position on the page. They actually use this on their documentation site as well. So as that page is scrolling, the sub-navigation that's over on the left side, the active state is moving as your page is moving, depending on what you're looking at. Make sense? Okay. Foundation has a couple of things that are interesting. They have an HTML5 form validation library. Go figure. It's called Abide. One of the things that I find confusing about Foundation is that they call these JavaScripty widgets by names that like have nothing to do with what they are. Bootstrap, you know, if Bootstrap's working with tabs, guess what they call it? Tabs. If they work with accordion panels, they call it collapse, but you can kind of understand that one. Foundation's names seem to like have no basis in reality. So they call this one Abide. You're abiding by the rules, yes, right? They have a responsive lightbox, which is called clearing. Anyone can explain that one to me? I don't know, which is kind of nice. They have a site tour, so you start at the top of the page and there's a pop-up that tells you something about the site, and if you click that, then it drops you down the page to another pop-up, so it's sort of like one of these site tours that'll skip you around on the site, okay? That's called Joyride. I kind of understand that one. And then they, as I mentioned earlier, they do have a responsive image scheme built into Foundation. It's called Interchange. And this is loading the correct individual image for screen resolution, including retina images. And it's all built into Foundation. And that's the JavaScript scheme. So again, only one image is going to load depending on the parameters for what you're working with. Okay. Sequoia, are you here? This one's for you. Sequoia and I were sitting at the speaker dinner on Friday night, and Sequoia asked me, he said, so tell me what the difference is between Bootstrap and Foundation. And I started, la, 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 la. He says, stop. Does Foundation have semicolons in their JavaScript? I said, yeah, I think so. And he's like, well, then that's what I would work with. And the truth of the matter is, I hadn't looked at this before, but if you look at Bootstrap's JavaScript, this is just a random chunk of JavaScript that I took out of this, there are no semicolons in sight. Does that bother anyone? Besides Sequoia? Okay, I just finished the jQuery Jam that Boston PHP user group put on, you know, where you work through the book and everything. So I'm learning JavaScript, and I looked at this code and I thought, wow, that is so confusing. Because I would wonder what I did wrong, of course, because I'm new to this and I'm still working on it. So there are no semicolons. But Foundation does actually have semicolons. There they are. So now you know Sequoia, Foundation has semicolons. To my eye, they're placed correctly, but I would trust your judgment over mine any day. They look great, okay? So a minor thing, but obviously important to some. All right, so the question you're all waiting for, who wins? Because, of course, only one framework can win. There can only be one. Well, of course, I think they're both great. So I want to give you some guidelines here. Use Bootstrap if you want a lot of styling out of the box. You don't really want to do a whole lot with CSS. This is why back-end developers love Bootstrap, because they can plug in Bootstrap. They don't have to worry about styling the front end. It's going to look reasonable. Okay? You don't necessarily want to change a whole lot of styling. Maybe you want to change a few colors, you want to drop in a logo, you want to do a little here or there, but you're not really going to dig into this and make it look radically different. Which is not to say you cannot do that. You absolutely can dig into Bootstrap and make it look nothing like a Bootstrap site. It's just you have a lot more to override or a lot more to change. If you are a less CSS fan, this is yet another one of these holy wars. Which is better, Mac or PC? Which is better, PHP or .NET? Which is better, less or SAS? Okay, if you have strong opinions on that matter, then, and you're a less person, then Bootstrap is the system for you. I will say that somebody has come along and rewritten all of Bootstrap's styling in SAS. So if you insist on SAS, you can probably find those files somewhere. That was at least true with version 2. I'm not sure if that has been done yet for version 3, but I would expect somebody will do that also. Or you need one of the unique characteristics that I've mentioned here. You know, you absolutely need a fix or scroll spy as part of your site. That would be another reason to use Bootstrap. Or you really hate semicolons in your JavaScript. Okay? Great. Those are my recommendations. And I would recommend you use Foundation if the following. You really don't want to override a ton of styling later. You're going to pick apart Foundation. You love the fact that a bunch of stuff is debugged for you, but you are going to really write a bunch of CSS or SAS or something. You're going to write all those styles later anyway. You love SAS and Compass. You need one of the unique characteristics that I mentioned. Maybe you're particularly intrigued by that responsive image interchange JavaScript component that I mentioned, for example. And you love semicolons in your JavaScript. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That is my summary for Bootstrap versus Foundation, and thank you very much for sticking around and listening. Yeah. All right, so who's got questions? You have questions?
Can you use both? Is that like, can it interface?
Can you use both Bootstrap and Foundation together on the same site?
Is there such a thing?
Well, I don't think people generally knew that because there's so much overlap between the two. In my experience, people are like, they love Bootstrap or they love Foundation. They rarely mix them. I suppose in theory, you might be able to download pieces of it. I didn't talk about the pieces you can download. Like you can say, I just want this piece of the JavaScript. You don't have to download the entire JavaScript library for one of these. So that might be something to experiment with. But I have personally never combined them. And I haven't heard of anyone who has. But by all means, give it a shot. If it blows up, then you'll have your answer. Yeah. Okay.
Are you spending time looking at Pure, YUI team? Are you spending time looking at Pure? From the YUI
Okay, so the question is, have I looked at Pure? No, I have not, because Bootstrap is number 1 in GitHub, Foundation is number 13, and Pure doesn't come in between. The one that comes in between is HTML5 boilerplate, believe it or not. That's like number 3 or 4. So if I was going to look at another one, I'd probably look at those. Now, my perspective, again, is I'm an educator first. So I have done professional web development in my life up until last year, and I decided I would train in whiny clients for whiny students, which I find whiny students to be much more fun. So I'm not actually I'm not building Bootstrap sites or Foundation sites professionally. If I was, maybe I would be interested in looking at something like Pure. But from an educational perspective, I'm interested in what's popular. So that's why I'm looking at Bootstrap and Foundation. Good question.
Maybe this is really complicated, but what makes Bootstrap not support right-to-left text, or what makes Foundation not accessible? It just seems like from the perspective of just starting with markup and nothing else.
Right.
Styles, I don't understand how it's
Well, okay, so Foundation, let me address the accessibility one because I think that's an easier answer for me. The accessibility with the markup and so forth, that you get as much accessibility as you get out of clean markup, which is a fair amount. But there's enhancements that you can add, like with these ARIA codes and so forth, and screen reader specific type of styling, which is not present in Foundation. So I think basically you're taking it to the next level with Foundation as opposed to Bootstrap.
Bootstrap has all the ARIA stuff already.
Bootstrap already has all the ARIA stuff in it, yes. And the other half of that again was what?
How is Bootstrap, how does it not support?
Oh, how does Bootstrap not support right to left? That's a very good question, and I did not take a close enough look at the code to tell you how Foundation supports it and how Bootstrap does not. But I will tell you that Foundation specifically has classes and things to make things work from right to left, and Bootstrap does not have those kinds of classes. Other questions? Comments are great.
Awesome.
I love comments.
I think I have an explanation for clearing.
Oh, you have an explanation for clearing. How the name came about, you mean?
It takes you out of the woods.
Ah, it takes you out of the woods. I love it. Thank you. Okay, great.
I just had a quick question about on lynda.com, if you do up and running on Bootstrap, and then there's like another one where it's like essentials. I don't know if it's essentials, but there's like another one. What's the difference between the two?
So up and running with Bootstrap is sort of the basics. I did another one called Bootstrap Adding Interactivity to Your Site, which sort of carries on. So like I didn't cover forms at all in up and running with Bootstrap. In the interactivity one, I covered forms and form styling and, like hiding and revealing form elements and a bunch of other wild and crazy things, things with thumbnails. Ray Villalobos just released a title that is actually more advanced with Bootstrap 3 and has to do with JavaScript and manipulating JavaScript inside of Bootstrap. So that is another Bootstrap title that's out. Does that help you at all?
Yeah, so you could do like all three of them.
You could absolutely do all three of them, and there won't be any overlap. Lynda.com is very careful about, not having the same course 3 times. They're all going to be unique. Yes, Bill.
You said there's a Bootstrap 3 on already.
Yeah, Bootstrap 3 is supposed to be released on Monday, which would be tomorrow.
Which Ray Villalobos already has a video.
Yes, Ray used one of the betas or release candidates to record his title. Yep. Any other questions? So let's take a quick survey. How many of you are using Bootstrap for your next project? Okay, a few of you. How many of you are totally going to use Foundation? Ah, a few more of you. Excellent. And how many of you think responsive frameworks are a bunch of crap and you would never use one in your entire life, no matter what? Even you? Wow.
For simple sites, they're really great.
Jonathan says for simple sites, they're really great. He probably isn't going to use one for Etsy, but yeah.
We use it for internal tools.
They use it for internal tools at Etsy. Hey, what do you know? All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. See you later. Cool.
I'm also not a designer, so Bootstrap's better for my use case.
That's how